Good evening. Thank you. My name is Kristin Juarez. I'm Senior Research Specialist here at the Getty Research Institute. Welcome to the Getty. As part of the J. Paul Getty Trust, the GRI is an international research center with a vast library, special collections, and an array of programs committed to preserving, creating, and sharing resources related to the history of art. We would like to acknowledge that the land that Getty inhabits today was once known as Tovangar, the home of the Gabrieleño Tongva people. We show our respects to the Gabrieleño Tongva people, as well as all First People, past, present, and future, and honor their labor as original caretakers of this land. Getty commits to building relationships with the Gabrieleño Tongva community, and we invite you to acknowledge the history of the land and join us in caring for it. I'd like to give a word of thanks to everyone involved in bringing this event to you today. I'd like to thank our AV team, and a special thank you to Lauren Artis and Janani Subramaniam of GRI Programs, and the organizers of the Art on Screen series, which celebrates moving image media and its intersection with art and art histories, as well as the Black Visions Film as Archive as part of the African American Art History Initiative. I'd also like to give thanks to Aubin Pictures and our co-presenters, Crenshaw Dairy Mart, the artist collective and art gallery dedicated to shifting trauma-induced conditions of poverty and economic justice, bridging cultural work and advocacy, and investigating ancestries through the lens of Inglewood and its community. Thank you, Crenshaw Dairy Mart. Finally, this program complements the Getty Scholars Program, our 2025-26 annual theme, Repair. The issue of repair has deep bearing for the arts. Situated between the forces of creation and destruction, the act of repair can be deeply transformative with the potential to heal, alter, and renew our material and social environments. So for today's program, alongside Crenshaw Dairy Mart, we are honored to host the Los Angeles premiere of the film Paint Me a Road Out of Here, completed in 2024 by filmmaker Catherine Gund. Yeah. The film follows the journey of the monumental painting For the Women's House, created in 1971 by the legendary Faith Ringgold for the women incarcerated at Rikers Island Jail. 50 years later, artist Mary Enoch Elizabeth Baxter finds herself banding together with an eclectic group of activists, politicians, artists, and corrections officers, and Faith Ringgold herself, to free the work with the ultimate goal of freeing the women. The history of the painting tells a compelling story that intertwines Ringgold's visionary practice and legacy, the stewards attempting to safeguard the work, and the personal stakes of making art in and about the carceral system. We are joined today by filmmaker Catherine Gund. We are also joined by a central figure in the film, artist Mary Enoch Elizabeth Baxter, as well as Ashley Blakeney, director of Crenshaw Dairy Mart. After the screening, we will discuss how their shared investments in social justice through art is made manifest by their distinct artistic practices. And just a note about general housekeeping, please do take a moment to silence your cell phones. We can all join together outside for a reception where you are also welcome to ask us all questions. And it's also a moment to get your parking validated, so don't forget to do that either. Thank you. We're going to get started. Thank you once again for joining us this evening. We're joined on stage right now with Ashley Blakeney, director of the Crenshaw Dairy Mart. We're also joined by Mary Enoch Elizabeth Baxter and Catherine Gund. Thank you so much for offering this opportunity for us to screen this film tonight. I wanted to start maybe with establishing a shared vocabulary for us in the group to talk about what abolition work means to you all in your practice, in your organization, in your community building, and how that plays a role in your art making and vision.
I guess I'll go first. First and foremost, I want to thank you for the invite and for everyone for joining us today on this Wednesday evening. For me, abolition, it means total freedom. It means radical imagination. It means creating the future that we want now and not later. It means community, shared responsibility, personal responsibility, and care, right? Critical care. And that's something that's tangible that we can do on a daily, you know, as a personal practice, but also as a communal practice. And I think it starts there.
I think all of those brilliant, beautiful things, but I also think abolition is something that all of us should consider, and that we should all be abolitionists if we really believe in hope or the future or justice or art or change, because if we can't imagine a world without prisons and caging, why are you alive? Like, why would you not want to be able to think about that and work towards that? And for me, it's really, that's what art is seeing things that aren't here and working on getting there.
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I think for us at Crenshaw Dairy Mart, we look at abolition as two prongs. We look at it as the dismantling of harmful, oppressive systems, and then the building and creation and imagination of a new world, and of a world where all of our needs are met, where we're able to live with dignity, where we're able to live in freedom and care with each other. And we call our work practicing the abolitionist imagination. And really thinking about how are we embodying these practices in our everyday lives and our everyday interactions, and how are we moving through the world and in our community living in that new world already. And we just deeply believe that artists are at the forefront of this. Like, artists are the people that are imagining the new world, and we have to be so integral to these conversations.
Thank you. I think that's a really good place to start, to also think about this story as centered around an artist and an artwork. And I wonder if you could share a little bit around this sense of urgency that we feel in the film, and how you started working together around this moment and this potential to move the painting, and then also how you thought about building out all of these other stories around Faith Ringgold, around your story. Just give us a little bit of that kind of cohesion.
That's a fun question for me or for us, but I think, you know, in the beginning I thought it was going to be a short movie, because I thought, oh, this is so obvious. There's this painting, there's this artist, there's this other artist, and it's a New York story, and it seemed sort of like a one-liner. And as we worked on it more and more, we started to, or I started to kind of codify some of the lessons we were learning about how we got the painting out and how we could apply that to getting the women out. Because to me, it was never about getting the painting out, but that became sort of this urgent focus. And so when we sat back and were working on the movie, we realized there were 5 things, urgency being one of them, that helped us get the painting out. And if you apply them to any social justice movement or any transformation, it works as a recipe. And I'll say what the 5 are. One is urgency, because all of a sudden we had 2 weeks to get that painting out. And if people said we have 1 year to close Rikers, we would act differently with some sense of urgency. And I do love that the New York Times called it a thriller. The second one is accountability, that someone, like you said, part of abolition for you is taking responsibility, communal responsibility. And the 2 different commissioners, the one that was there when it was painted over, and the Commissioner Vinny that was there when we got it out, both took responsibility. They didn't say the mayor can do it or leave it for the next commissioner or it doesn't matter to us. community. We brought together the philanthropists and the artists and the government and the organizers and the activists, and everybody had a role. And I think we have to face that reality, no matter how uncomfortable we might feel with people who are different than us or who are bringing different things to the table, that if we can't all work together, we're not going to achieve our goals. And that really happened in getting this painting out, and that's what it's going to take to end mass incarceration. There was also a plan. Nobody's ever going to just open the doors to all the prisons and jails and detention centers. So we knew it could go to the Brooklyn Museum because they could protect it. They could insure it. They could make it accessible. They knew how to take care of it in terms of like air conditioning and whatever. And it had been there, and so we knew that was the plan. And so we need to have a plan for community-based mental health care and drug treatment and education, health care, and jobs, so that the environment exists where people can be together outside of prisons and jails. And the last one is value. And, you see in the film, this painting, when we saw it the first time and someone said, I was just reminding Mary, it was the day that Faith Ringgold died when we saw the painting. Faith Ringgold. It was the day that Bell Hooks had died when we first saw the painting. And we were at Rikers looking at other things, and we were all so depressed for all the reasons Helena says. And somebody said, you could cheer Kat up if you show her the Faith Ringgold. And I was like, there's a Faith Ringgold on this island? And Vinny goes, what's a Faith Ringgold? And so it was all of a sudden, he was like, this painting's worth $5 million, and it's actually, I'm allowed to say now, insured for $10 million. And he said, and I don't even know it's there, and suddenly the value of it mattered to them. And if people inside were valued and mattered, they would be protected, they would be supported, they would certainly not be caged. So if we value other humans, another obvious example is taking people's babies and children at the border. You don't take babies and children away from mothers that you value or fathers that parents that you value. So those are the 5 things, and it sort of developed intuitively from that, I think, for us, but halfway through, we realized that was what it was, and that's what made it a parable, and that's what made it not about the painting, even though the painting was the core of the story. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, it was pretty organic. Prior to, agreeing to do the commission on Rikers Island and meeting with Kat and discussing the film, I had been working through Mural Arts and the Independence Fund at the prison where I was incarcerated at, working on these workshops around how do we create these collaborative community murals based on affirmation. So I was kind of doing that work already in prison, so it was like an easy transition or, yes for me when I got the opportunity, when I was asked to join Kat in this work. So,
but I also think
it.
we need to celebrate and frame those connections and take them as models and take them as boilerplates and take them as stepping stones, because I think we're all involved in doing that a lot of the time. And we just think, this feels good right now because it kind of clicked and made sense, instead of saying this is how it should be done. When we decided Mary was going to be an executive producer on the film. I've been making documentaries for 35 years. You were not allowed to even let the people in the documentary see it before it was done, because that would compromise your journalistic integrity. And I think people are sort of coming around now to the idea that we've always celebrated, which is that we're making it. Aubin is making it with the people who are in it and with the organizations that are going to be able to use it in the end. And so it made perfect, it's Mary's story. Why wouldn't she be an executive producer?
Yeah, and there were a couple critical moments where we realized we had made the right decision. This one, one of the first earlier screenings of the film, Kat invited me over to watch the rough cut. And there was this scene in the film where I'm going through these psychological evaluations and I'm having a moment. And I never really get out what's upsetting me so much, but it's realizing in that moment how I was being silenced by this institution that was being paid to like care for me. And when I saw the rough cut, Kat had taken that out. And, you know, I asked her, I said, why?
Taken out the part where she cried.
Yeah, they had cut that out of the scene. And I asked her, you know, why she did that. And she said that, you know, I don't want to exploit you. And, you know, like, this is like documentary gold. You know, you're supposed to like go in and hone in with the camera. And when they cry, it's like, yes. And she was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I was like, well, I don't want to always have to be strong. Like, I've went through things that I'm still dealing with, and that I needed to be humanized in that way. And I wanted people to be able to see that and connect to that moment.
And so we changed it. That's when she became an executive producer.
Something that there's so many stories at the there's like stories wrapped up in stories in this film. And something that I think oftentimes when one can go to an art museum, sometimes things are meant to go over your head. They're meant to be conceptual with a capital C. And this is just so anchored, I think, also by Faith Ringgold's practice of storytelling, of sharing her own life, of putting that forward, putting that vulnerability forward. That really struck me. And I just maybe want to take a moment to ask you around how you think about storytelling, either through the filmic medium or through music or through community building. Like, how does that empower both you as an artist and who you would like your work to speak to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, having my artwork be autobiographical, it came out of necessity. It came out of survival. It came from a place of first trying to understand all of the like horrible experiences that I had gone through, but then also like trying to have the courage to process that. Like, once I was able to, you know, really dig in and analyze those things, but then ultimately to heal. My practice is a place where I found healing and, you know, just a place where I felt safe, a place where I felt heard, a place where I felt I could connect with others. So for me, that's, you know, what my artistic practice is at its core. And being able to, you know, go back into prisons and share some of those tools with people who otherwise wouldn't, you know, have that opportunity has been invaluable. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for that.
Yeah, I think this is a really great question. I think, you know, I think innately storytelling is in our DNA, especially as Black folks, and just something that we have always had as a part of our culture and our practice, and like we've always made a way out of nothing, and have always, you know, I was thinking a lot about how, you know, like our imagination can't be caged, and like that whole conversations around like the way that art was showing up for the women while they were incarcerated. And I think that there's something very specific that's connecting for me here that I didn't piece together until today, is the way that Faith was storytelling through quilting, and how that has become a part of our practice at the Dairy Mart where it wasn't before. But the reason it has become a part of our practice at the Dairy Mart connects directly back to the line that really triggered me around, you know, we were trying to fight for liberation and we didn't get the grant. And as a Black political abolitionist space, that's the position we're in right now. And it's really interesting, you know, we opened in 2020. A lot of our work was really centered around prison abolition. We were grantees of Art for Justice, and we had really amazing funders in the beginning, and then folks didn't really know what to do with us. And it has impacted our funding, and so we had to get creative, and we were like, okay, how do we stick to our values, right, of ancestry, healing, abolition? How do we stick to our storytelling? How do we stick to what feels important to us? And so this whole year we've been running a series of monthly workshops called the Abolitionist Toolbox. And it's what are the skills that we need to be sharing with each other in this moment in 2025? Like, what do we need to be doing? We need to be in community. We need to be skill building. And so through that, we are in the process of a 5-week quilting course. And it's just such a beautiful reminder of how, you know, quilts in themselves are so ingrained in our DNA from the Underground Railroad to now. And so many of Faith's paintings are actually quilts, and it's the way in which she layered and layered and layered the stories and the storytelling, and was actually writing stories and depicting them. And I just think it's so powerful and really beautiful. And so I just think that there's always a way that we are innovative and thinking about, you know, no matter what, like, our story will be told, and maybe the medium looks different, and maybe the vehicles look different, but that is what is at the core, is we have to be the ones to tell our own story.
Did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say, there's a part in the film where, you know, I always have like a visceral experience, and it's in the reimagining of the 2 historical photographs that I found while working at Mural Arts Philadelphia, which is based in the Home and Home studio of Philadelphia's most famous artist, Thomas Eakins. And, you know, employing like this creative, critical fabulation coupled with like Afrofuturism and thinking of time travel and how we can reimagine like archives of violence. Whereas like, I'm thinking now about like temporal paradox and being able to make a critical intervention in the past that not only creates a new future, but also a radically new present. You know, where this work isn't needed, right? Because the intervention was done back then. And I think, you know, thinking about the child that's, you know, in these photographs and, you know, having been trapped within these images for over 100 years, and something so simple as like inserting myself and reimagining those moments safe and protected as they should have been, how much healing it did for me as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and what it can do for, you know, historians, intellectuals, or just people in our everyday that want to restore dignity to people who didn't experience it in their lifetimes. Like, these archives aren't stagnant. And the archive itself isn't like a true record. And I think that's what that work exemplifies.
I would just, I mean, obviously I'm all wrapped up in telling stories because that's what I think. I mean, I also think films are archives, make themselves archives, even as they make use of archives. But I think, for me, storytelling is everything. I feel like words are storytelling, agreements are storytelling. So we agree that words mean certain things, and I feel like the rest of the time we're just trying to figure it out. And it's all about, like, well, communication. So any love or any relationship or any living is about having a relationship with someone else or with lots of other people. And to do that, we have to have a story. And it can be sloppy and unexamined, or it can be really curious and genuine and open and searching. And I think that some of the best art, I mean, the piece that Mary's talking about with the, you get to see it in here, but I love the part where it's in the vitrine at the Brooklyn Museum and they're all in closed frames. And, you know, Mary's an incredibly conceptual artist, and yet, like you said, it's very direct, and you understand it, you get what you need to get. It's not intentionally abstract or vague in a way that is supposed to be inaccessible. It's thoughtful, and I think that's the best kind of storytelling.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about a story that we started to discuss in the green room, and I think it has to do with lineage and legacy. So maybe you could share with us a little bit around
Sure.
Faith Ringgold.
So it's not reflected in the film, but
You cannot put everything in one film.
yeah, we can't. I mean, it would have been like a 4-hour film. But if anyone in here has read the memoirs of Faith Ringgold, We Flew Over the Bridge, then you know within the first chapter, first paragraph, Faith starts the book off with her birth story and her mother being rushed to a hospital in Harlem, and upon arrival, a nurse attempting to tie her hands. And in the book, Faith says that her mother states, "I'd rather die before I give birth shackled." So for me, when I read that, I knew that this connection was deeper than this film. It was definitely ancestral, it was spiritual, and it was probably one of the reasons why Faith was so willing to work with us, because she easily could have been my son, right? Her mother easily could have been me, and I think she saw that reflection.
I'll ask you, Ashley, if you could expand a little bit more. You named some of your guiding values as ancestral and healing. If you could share a little bit more of how that plays out as a community arts space.
Yeah, absolutely. So Crenshaw Dairy Mart, we operate on 3 core values: ancestry, healing, and abolition. And I'd be remiss to not acknowledge our founders, Alireza Darius, Patrice Cullors, and Noe Olivas. And the 3 of them founded our space as a space that lives in the lineage of Black artist, organizer, gallerist spaces in Los Angeles. And it's a very particular and beautiful lineage that we are a part of and that we are a child of, really. That kind of acknowledges a bit of our ancestry DNA piece, right? And, we look to the Brockman Davis galleries. We look towards St. Elmo's Village. Right now, our garden at the Dairy Mart, our abolitionist pod, is full of all succulents that Miss Jackie at St. Elmo's Village gave us. And, we've really channeled their mural practice in our space. And it's really important to us that we are aware and living in our values and in alignment with those that came before us. The healing piece is really important because of our just emphasis and acknowledgement and awareness around arts healing and the power of it. My personal tie to that, my background is I'm a certified arts healing facilitator, however you want to call that, but I understand the power in which art can be healing, can be therapeutic, and I used to do a lot of arts healing work with children and teens living with cancer, and the understanding of, even in a hospital, they also need that release. They also need some type of work and practice. And, we're also healing the relationships between institutions and Black and brown artists and the damage that has held. And I thought it was so interesting, that parallel being in this film of, museums and jails kind of being founded on the same practice. And I would throw schools in the equation as well. And there's just so much institutional harm that has been caused to Black and brown communities. And so our work is really trying to heal our relationships, heal within ourselves and each other, and then provide that space for artists to really kind of find themselves and ground in that. And, technically we're training the next wave of politicized artists is how we look at our work. And then, like I mentioned, the abolition piece, and that really is through a lot of the lineage and practice that one of our founders, Patrice, has done in Los Angeles over more than a decade. And she's really been at the forefront of that artist and abolitionist practice, and really being tied to a lot of the decisions that shut down jails and have really been demonstrated in that. And so our first exhibition that actually opened 2 weeks before COVID, Yes on R, really featured a lot of that work and a lot of the art in relation to policy work in trying to shut down jails. And a couple years ago, we did a show, Yes on R, Yes on J, Shut Down MCJ. It's a mouthful, but it really was essentially a retrospective from 2011 and beyond of just the work that artists and organizers have been doing to really kind of put a lens on what is happening in the largest jailer in the United States. And so that's really kind of where we operate, is on those 3 pillars. And it's when I came into the Dairy Mart, it was just the 3 co-founders, and I was the first staff person. We were a year old, and it was the first place that I had been where I saw everybody actually operating on our values on a daily basis. And it's become such an integral part of our practice, is that nothing that we do is outside of those values, and it's how we feel like we can make the most impact. And hopefully that's what reverberates into the community and the work that we do.
Can you just talk for a minute, in case people don't know, about the bunk beds in the street? Because I feel like, in the intersections, because I think that people don't realize how close and really the same in many cases art and activism are.
Yeah.
And that example of kind of a performance art sculpture installation, I think was really powerful and effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope I recount the story well. I keep looking at Alireza as our curator and researcher. But that was a performance that Patrice did where she worked with a fabricator to do 100 jail beds. And then she commissioned different artists to make art around each of the jail beds. And it was a jail bed drop performance to just really demonstrate the numbers and the power and the impact that was affecting our communities. I wish I could speak more eloquently about it, but it did, it really, that type of performance work I think is so important, as you're saying, of how for folks who are not necessarily directly impacted by the system, they're not aware of how deep the harm goes. And I think that going back to the role of artists in practicing the abolitionist imagination, I think that's why artists are so important to be a part of it. And even as many reports may come out or papers may come out, and who's reading all of that? Who's actually getting the understanding of what is happening in these systems? And Patrice in particular has a really delicate way of taking these experiences, and Mary, you do too, now that I know your work a little bit better, right? There's so many artists that are taking these experiences and putting it into art and making it accessible, and I hope.
No, that's wonderful, and I think just to continue with some of those ideas, I think the inside outside. Yesterday we showed this in San Francisco at the Roxy, and two of the people who joined were the hosts of Ear Hustle, an amazing podcast that people should listen to if they don't already. And so Nigel and Earlon were there, and at first the moderator, we were all talking beforehand, and they were like, how should I connect you all? Earlon was an advisor on the film, but other than that, it's not about podcasters. And I said, they are working on getting the inside out and the outside in, and that's exactly what Mary's doing, going in, coming out, and seeing the beds, or the jail beds, these narrow, janky bunk beds in the middle of the intersection, I think teaches people who are outside about the inside, but it also gives inside people a way to feel affirmed, a way to feel seen. One of the magic parts of this for me is when Jaquan Faison did the paintings of being inside Rikers during COVID. And we've been at many screenings where there have been people who were inside during COVID in the audience who are literally crying and stand up and say, this is the first time I've seen or anyone else has seen what it looked like, because cameras weren't allowed in. Yeah. People were on lockdown for the most part. People were isolated. And, and he made these paintings that I feel like, he put his own eyes on a lot of the people, which I think for people who know him, it resonates differently. But, you get this sense of what it was like, and we're able to see something we wouldn't see otherwise, and it's only through the art. And so I think the inside-outside story, where the inside becomes the outside and the outside becomes the inside, and they're still going back and forth, that for me, storytelling is just about never realizing that the story's never going to end. So you have to keep, even for this film, right? This is part of the story. It's still going. We're talking about it. This is beyond the movie.
I think that's also, hearing you say the story's never gonna end. And it was shocking to me that painting was done in the 70s, right? And it's it's literally this repeat cycle. And as I was watching this, and I was thinking so much about what we're about to go through, another wave of mass incarceration, right? We're obviously in forever a state of mass incarceration, but in thinking about, the fact that food stamps are about to be cut. There's anything that is a public service that is supposed to be supportive and helping people have their needs met are going to be gone. and folks are gonna have to do what they have to do. And you're gonna find, I feel, not to be a pessimist, but to be a realist in how this year has been going, we're going to see another mass wave. And I just think it's so unfortunate, but true, that the cycle is just, okay, sorry.
And we have
I'm
to
just
keep
gonna
thinking of ways out of it.
Yes.
Because if they hadn't thought of ways out of it before, we wouldn't be here now. And we can't give, this is not the worst. And it is going to get better or change. It may, a lot of people are going to be hurt, and it's going to take a long time. But I think we have to, it's like the painting looks so quaint to us now. And that's another one of my favorite scenes is when the people who were incarcerated at Rikers are talking about the art. And they're like, look at this painting. It means nothing right now, but that's why it was so organic for Mary to become involved, because Faith still lives, Faith's work matters, but it has to keep translating into new people and new stories. And when she says this painting doesn't hold what happened since 1970, and now I feel like so much of our work doesn't, even looking at Art for Justice things or the founding of Crenshaw Dairy Mart, those things, that's not how we would start something today.
And still, these toolkits, these skill buildings, this networking matters. And these documents of how one artist, one community, one system, closed system tried to fight against another is so important to keep on record in films like this. I want to thank you all for joining us, and just as a way of bringing Faith Ringgold into the room, and to echo your insistence on intention, I'd like to just share a brief quote from her. Raise your voice, unite, and tell your story. Thank you. We'll join you in the reception outside.